Hello, everybody. Good morning. Well, actually, it isn't morning. It's afternoon now. It's about 20 minutes after 12 on, what is it today? April 30th. So we're almost into May. I am inspired to do a bit of a video today. Why am I inspired? I suppose because I guess you could say what's been most present for me in my work as a counselor and therapist. If you don't know that I'm that, then know that now. My name is John Solano, and I've been a counselor for 30 plus years. Over the last decade, I've been a family counselor working with at-risk families who are in high levels of conflict and tension. Um, I've spent my entire career working with people who have chronic problems to life circumstances. Started out my career as a substance abuse counselor, again working with indigent and multiple barriered or concurrent disordered individuals. So I don't want to say a lot more about that, but because I want to get to this. I'm working with a lot of people out there. What can you say? Who need to wake up. Who need to wake up. And I guess, the task of any teacher in some ways is to kind of say this and deliver this message in a way that is also considerate of the human condition. Because we're all in a state, if you will, of waking up. Some of us a little slower than others for a lot of different reasons. Now, this whole thing about waking up, has been with us since the beginning of time, since the beginning of humanity. Um, just trying to come to terms with life. Now, as I'm working in families right now and with families, it is so common to see like maybe one family member committed to waking up, to doing something about the circumstances, while other family members either are, kind of indifferent or unaware or even aggressively opposed. But the condition exists. It's a human condition. But I want to say that there are those of you who are experiencing chronic problems across the board, whether it be mentally, emotionally, relationally, physically, financially, whatever it is. Chronic problems. What is a chronic problem? Well, obviously, it's one that has been with you for a long, long period of time. And it's very likely that you've tried many, many things to alleviate the distress of the condition. There's so many different parables and quotes and teachings and wisdom teachings that are going through my mind right now that I have shared in the past. But, I think one of the things that is true that comes through the wisdom teachings, it's the old story of, let a sleeping dog lie. In other words, there's a part of the human condition in which people want to be asleep. Even though people say they want help, even though people say they want relief, even though people say they want a cure or what have you, it's equally true, if not more true, that people want to stay asleep. But it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. Where does that start? That's a big question. Again, I work with groups, if you will, family groups, other groups, and some people are very heightened, very sensitive to the need for something to change, for the need for a wake up, while others seem to be quite asleep or quite resistant. I think that's a very personal battle, if you will, that people have to take on. And it's also a very tough one, because if you're in a family situation, if you're in a marriage, if you're in a parent-child relationship, and one of you is awake or is waking and the other person is not interested, or just doesn't even seem to have the capacity for it or the heart for it, that can be very hard, very stressful on a family, very stressful on a relationship. I see this every day, and the best I can offer anybody in that situation is what I say, mind your own business. What is your business? Your business is your own integrity. Sometimes you got to cut people loose, and I don't mean that physically. I just mean that mentally. It's like waiting for other people to wake up, waiting for other people to say yes, waiting for other people to have a heart's desire for seeking the truth. I've just, realized that is something that none of us have control over for another person. All we can do is focus on maintaining our own integrity. Integrity with what? What does integrity mean? It means being one with, whole, or undivided. Integrity with what? Well, integrity with our own personal code of honor. In other words, our own deeply held convictions, values, and beliefs that we hold dear. Staying true to those, in fact, is a ton of work, requires a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness. But let me kind of move a little deeper into this. I have a son. Most of you know this if you've come to my groups and have Zoomed with me or what have you. I've got a son, 26 years old. Ever since he was young, 12, 13, 14, he had a desire, a dream, if you will, a vision to become a soldier, to go into become a Marine, United States Marine. And he is that now. He's in a very dangerous occupation right now. He's could be called into combat at a moment's notice. So I'm one of those parents who, and this is my only son and my only offspring, my only child. And that's a whole other discussion as to how he and I came to the conclusion or an agreement that he would put himself in harm's way for the safety of us all. And I'm really happy that was a father and son conversation, and something that conversations, something that brought us closer together and made us much more conscious of what the cost is for freedom and for safety. But when he was younger, he had gone to a party in a town that was not his own, but he encountered a group of boys, and one of these boys he had a confrontation with. My son was attempting to, and did kind of protect the honor of a young lady at the party, and the other boy did not appreciate that, but they kind of settled their matters as boys often do, and kind of say, agree to disagree or whatever, and walk away, and the issue was over. Well, this time it wasn't. And as my son was getting ready to leave the party with his friends, this other boy punched him, blindsided him, and so whatever, a fight began, and they got out of there and went their own way. The next morning, I saw a bruise on my son's head, and I said, what's this all about? He told me the story. And I said, son, in our house, we live by a code of honor. And one of the things we know, because we live in a free world, that we are the cutting edge of consciousness. And we know, because of our spiritual discipline and other things, that the real war is on the inside. The real war is in our hearts. And he turned and said to me, Dad, that's true, and I do believe that. He said, but not everybody does. And until everybody does, then, it'll be up to me to protect. And that was a profound conversation that he and I had about the nature of the world that we live in, and about the nature of the struggle that we all are in, and how we balance that. As a therapist, counselor, over all these years, it is not only my belief in it, but after studying years of theology and different spiritualities, mythology, etc., is that the greatest wars we will fight are on the inside of ourselves. That is really well spoken to by so many different disciplines. And that's part of being on the cutting edge of consciousness. We know that the inner battle is the real battle to fight. See, when people don't know that it's the inner battle that they need to fight, then they, what we call, project it out, like a movie, a movie being played from a projector, being thrown forward onto a screen, but the image is really from behind you. And most societies that are not well educated do not have an idea of this idea of projection. They don't know how to understand that what's going on in the outside world is a reflection of their own heart's condition. But that's what waking up really is. Wake up. If somebody even knew the principle of projection, they could begin waking up. They could know that what's going on in the outside world is very likely a reflection of what's going on in their own world. Does that mean that a person will sit in self-reflection and disconnect from the outer world? No. As my son said, people are in various degrees of waking up. And until people wake up, they are dangerous. And those who are waking up, if you will, those who see things differently, you have to balance those two worlds, those two realities. Waking up doesn't mean being naive at all. In fact, it means quite the opposite. It means you can both fight the outer battle and the inner battle. You can both stand on guard and do the work that's necessary on the inside. But this is a moment here where, like I said, I'm inspired, possibly not in a good way, as I'm working with families from day to day who live in the free world, who have access to tons of information. There's really no excuse for not waking up. Of course, the reality is that a lot of people aren't woke up, or don't even see the need for it. There are reasons for that. People have experienced trauma in their history, what have you. I see a lot of that. But even then, people will report to me that they do have histories of trauma, but they've never done anything about it. What I call unaddressed trauma, and that just wreaks havoc in families and in marriages. Well, what are people doing instead? Well, it's kind of like they're sleeping. Well, what is sleep? Well, if you remember the movie The Matrix, that whole thing was about waking up. It was about how people are born into this illusion of what life is, but there are groups of people who want to see reality, who want to wake up. And so most people are just busy, doing regular life, as if that were the most important thing. Trying to solve problems from the outside in, and it never works. This is why chronic problems exist. And this is why the wisdom teachings are so important, to be able to get insight. Now, I say to you things like, people will say they want to be free. People will say they want to get better. People will say they want freedom from a certain ailment or a certain disturbance or a certain problem. But yet, do they really? I mean, one might say, well, of course, but no, I can guarantee you this. It happens every day. It happens with me. It happens to all of us. I provide tons of resources to families and parents every day. And when I ask them, did they access those resources? Did they even look at them? They will 99% will say no, they haven't. at some point you've got to question somebody's, if you will, legitimacy, the legitimacy of their desire. Wake up. Wake up. I was thinking about my son again, who's in the military, and you know, and so the outer battle and the inner battle. And I know that there are a lot of folks who go into the military or into police work or into, kind of first responder work, and the incidences of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, domestic violence, divorce are very high in those professions. So what that tells me is that you can fight the exterior battle all you want, but that is not going to put a dent in this interior battle. People retire from the police force or state patrol or RCMP or what have you from the military, and can't function well in their regular lives. And not just because PTSD, but it's just, they've been so immersed in that outer battle that now the inner battle is what they have to deal with. And really, it's what we deal with the rest of our lives. And that really makes the most sense. Even developmentally speaking, as you grow older, you become less, hopefully, you become less interested in and less even capable of fighting the external battle. There's a certain exhaustion that goes with that. Just as there's a certain exhaustion, a very common exhaustion that most family members eventually get to when they've tried to fight the external battle, when they've tried to change their kids, when they've tried to change their husband or wife, when kids have tried to change their parents. And there's just a sense of futility about that leads to deep exhaustion. Unfortunately, sometimes it can lead to depression as well. But there are those who wake up. There are those who wake up and say, you know what, I'm getting this. That's kind of like blue smoke and mirrors. Like that's the false grail. That's, I know that that's real tempting to go that direction and try to fight the external battle, but it really is a dead end road. And the only road left that even makes sense at a very practical level is the inner road. The inner road to fight that battle. But as I was thinking about my son, and I was saying earlier, is that kind of the external military experience and the internal war are much the same. It is a way to look at it. And one of the things that comes to mind that I say all the time to the families that I work with and the individuals, is kind of keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. In other words, get to know yourself. How do you wake up? Well, first of all, you got to realize there is a need to wake up. That is the nature of life. All wisdom teachings point to this. The Buddhists say life is suffering. Wake up to that. Wake up. Life is suffering. Life is a struggle. The Christians talk about this all the time as well. It's like the nature of an individual is defective, if you will. It's what they call the sin nature. And we wrestle with that. There's a really cool biblical story of a guy named Jacob who basically wrestles with God all night. He doesn't initially know that it's God, but then eventually comes to the awareness that, yeah, he's wrestling with God. And of course you could ask all sorts of questions like why would even God wrestle with a mortal, or what have you. But what's really cool about the story is that Jacob wrestles with God all night. And he will not stop fighting with God until he gets a blessing. He wants God's blessing. And he wrestles all night for it. And at the end of the evening, God inflicts an injury upon him in his hip, I believe it is. But from that point on, he walks forward with a limp. Have you ever heard that saying? Never trust someone who doesn't have a limp. In other words, never trust somebody who hasn't wrestled with life. Never trust somebody who doesn't know about the inner war. Everybody wants to have a good life, right? Everybody, wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be successful. Everybody wants to have money. Everybody wants to have health. Everybody wants to have a great relationship, great family. We all want these blessings. But there's a wrestling match that has to go on. There's a war for it. So the story kind of says, if you want blessing in your life, then no, you're in a wrestling match. You're at war. Like, that's a foundational understanding. Everybody who has any consciousness at all, any understanding of wisdom teachings, any understanding of what maturity is, knows that there's a wrestling match going on. There's a war on the inside. You have to wake up to that to begin with. Know that that's what's going on. The wrestling match, the tension between good and evil. That's been around forever. Wake up to it, and it's going on inside you. The other thing I want to say is, don't underestimate the power and the capacity of that internal enemy, if you will, what you're wrestling with. It is very sophisticated and very deceptive, capable of many, many manipulations and illusions. Do not underestimate that. Most people do. And what do? They overestimate their own capacity. Whether it's pride or whether it's narcissism or whatever it is, it's like, again, they don't want to accept reality. Like Jacob in the story, accept reality. You're up against something bigger than you. If you want a blessing in your life, if you want something to get better, then you've got to face reality. You're up against something bigger than you. And you wrestle and wrestle and wrestle with it. What happens? You get hurt. You get exhausted. You walk away limping. And hopefully that is also a mark of wisdom, that you've learned something. Don't think too much of yourself in this. Don't overestimate your own capacity, and don't underestimate the internal enemy. What do you need to do next? Like I said, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Collect intel. Intelligence, right? Study. Get into a discipline, a truth-seeking discipline of some kind, so you can understand what your own history is. What is it that you are wrestling with personally? Where did it come from? Where's the war zone? Where is it happening? How long has this war and battle been going on? You'll probably find out that this is something that's been passed on from generation to generation, that's been going on for decades, maybe even for hundreds of years. What's the war about? What are your motives? What is it that you're really wrestling with? Are you wrestling with your own insecurities? You're wrestling with your own sense of entitlement? Are you wrestling with, your sense of what, injustice? So get to know yourself. Get to know what's going on. Because if you don't, you're going to try to play it out in the outside world, and it's just going to exhaust you and deplete you. That's the wrestling match. You see, this is the way the inner enemy works as well. The inner enemy, think of it as like the little angel and the little devil on your shoulder. You're feeling some sense of struggle, some sense of disturbance, some sense of confusion, some sense of something has traumatized you, whatever it is. And that little devil pops up. Why? Because that's when you're most susceptible to hearing things, to believing things that aren't true. And it'll try to convince you through seduction to fight that war on the outside. You'll get so exhausted and depleted. It's just not the direction to go. I hope in some way this message is something that maybe men can relate to a little bit more with the military reference to this. A lot of guys, especially if it's a guy who has experienced trauma in his history, who has grown up in a tough life, you'll often hear people say, well, I overcame this. I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps, and you might even hear them refer to themselves as soldiers, or have fought battles, what have you, been in the trenches. And, and again, this message is for all of humanity and not just men, but I hope those men who are in relationships and in families realize the importance of waking up. This is where leadership is, right here. Anybody can fight a battle on the outside world, but as a mature person and mature men, we really have to embrace that the war is on the inside. The war is on the inside. As my son said to me, yes, not everybody believes that, and we will be on the lookout, and we will be on guard, and we will protect, and we do have the skills to fight, but that is a second choice. That is not the first choice. First choice is to spend our time in a discipline that helps us, again, collect information on that inner battle so we can fight that well. It just pains me when I work with families and etc. And it's only the moms that are showing up to the counseling sessions. And dads think that they're doing the honorable thing by being at work or being somewhere else. I'm a dad. I know what it's like to work. I know what it's like to get recognition. I know what it's like to bring home the bacon, if you will. But that's something that many men get well overinvested in. And when those men aren't showing their family members how to step up to the plate and have that inner battle, then you're doing half your job, and you're probably not even doing the part of the job that is the most important and the most inspiring. We want to be able to help our sons and daughters fight that inner battle from day one. They shouldn't have to wake up to the possibility that's an inner battle when they're in their 30s or 40s, when their life is in the toilet and they've been through 2 marriages already. Is that what you want for your son or daughter? Of course not. So good leadership looks like, if you will, being engaged in the inner battle. Come and stand with the great minds. The great minds in the world knew this. The great teachers, the great leaders, they all knew this. Instead of standing out there, on the outskirts of the victory, come in and join the victory. Be part of something honorable, ultimately honorable, and something that can have some huge impact on the lives of the people in your family and in your community. Wake up. It's time to wake up. Again, dads, moms, everybody. So, I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll hear that inner voice in you that says it is time to take on that inner battle. There's so many resources out there for you. Look at my YouTube channel. Look at the videos that I've created. Look at my library, where I've put many resources for people on how to raise their consciousness from different teachers and different lectures. Start gathering intel. Get to know more about yourself and about the reality of life. It's all there for you. You just have to say yes. You just have to plant that flag and say, it's time. Sick and tired, as they say, of being sick and tired. Time to wake up. Time to embrace the gift of your freedom. All right, guys, have a good day.